Everyone is missing this with all the eyes and all the importance on the Sixers nailing this number 3 overall pick, whether they draft someone like Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe, whether they trade the pick for a superstar, whether they move up, whether they move down. All eyes are on that number 3 pick, but it is very important. I'm not going to say just as important or as important, but it is still up there with one or two of the most important things of this offseason outside of that number 3 pick, and it's nailing that number 35 overall selection. And while all eyes are on the top of the draft, having the ability to get a young, cheap, athletic player under contract with that number 35 overall pick in the second round is a huge move for the Philadelphia 76ers, and it feels like everyone is just bypassing that decision. And the other night, on Wednesday night at midnight, going into Thursday, the NBA draft early withdrawal or early entry deadline came about, which basically meant players had the opportunity up until midnight on Thursday night, Wednesday into Thursday, to either keep their name in the NBA draft if they were an underclassman or withdraw and announce they were going back to school. And there were several players throughout the day that made some eye-opening moves, like Yaxel Lendenberg, a UAB player that was transferring to Michigan. He looked like to be a guy that moved himself into the first round. He announces he's going back to school. Tahad Pettiford, a guard we really like here on the station. We talked about him a couple times. He declares that he will be going back to school and back to Auburn, but there was a few guys that kept their name in the draft that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to have their eyes on. I've seen them in mock drafts as well to the 76ers, and in that kind of 30 to 40 overall pick range. But this is a pick that the 76ers have the chance to add a young, athletic, cheap player on a multi-year contract, get him in the building, and get these young bodies in there. And as we know, that's one of the goals of Daryl Morey's offseason. He's been out there openly saying that this is a situation where he's looking to get younger and more athletic. And this was a tweet from Keith Pompey back in April, and it has a quote from Daryl Morey on it. But realizing their team was old and slow, the Sixers added Lonnie Walker, 26, and Quentin Grimes, 24, to get younger and more athletic during the season. That was also, on the backs of an undrafted free agent guy like Justin Edwards. But this is an exact quote from Morey at the end of the season. What can I do better? There's quite a few things there. I would say one of those things is I was very focused on finding veteran-type players who generally perform very well in the playoffs, and I didn't put enough emphasis on the team getting through the regular season. So next season, for sure, we will be a younger, more dynamic group, and there's no better option scenario to do that than the NBA draft, and having the opportunity to get one of these guys in-house, in the building, under contract, on a cheap deal. There's a slew of guys kind of in the market, and we're going to dive into a couple of them in this video that I think could be perfect fits for the Sixers team. But just example one, you look at the Thunder, and obviously they've had a little bit more luck with their draft picks, have been afforded some more picks, and they have picks for years to come. That is why it looks like a potential dynasty could be brewing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But with all the young draft picks and young players, they've been able to afford to go out and sign a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein last year, pay SGA his max contract. You have all these young players kind of in the mix as well, though, that are interchangeable. You bring in a guy like Alex Caruso. He's probably not going to be a long-term piece there due to the money he command, but he's a player that you can go out and take a risk to bring in. And then when you have young guys like both Jalen Williams, like a Case and Wallace, that whole kind of rotation of being young, affordable players, that's what the 76ers have the opportunity to do, adding a young, affordable guy like a player in the second round here at number 35 that could get added to the mix and help this team as soon as next year, and on an affordable deal as well. And when you look at the Sixers last season, they were the oldest roster in the league. So it's certainly a point of emphasis for this team this offseason to get younger and to get more athletic. And there's two players I have my eyes on in the second round at that number 35 overall pick. And it's also a situation where I wouldn't be surprised to see if the Sixers, trade some cash, look to find a way to get back into the second round. Get these cost-controlled guys under contract if you're a believer in them. And Daryl Morey, I think his draft pedigree has been pretty good during his time with the Sixers, identifying and taking Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain for sure. But you look at Adem Bona and what he developed into over the second half of last season. Justin Edwards on the undrafted free agent market as well is looking like a steal. But there's a couple guys that I want to highlight that should be in the mix for the Sixers right here at number 35 overall. One of the players, I've talked about him on the station before, a late bloomer, During his college career and throughout his high school career as well, he wasn't even a top 100 prospect. That's Adou Thiero, and he goes to the University of Kentucky. He plays for the first 2 years under Coach Cal, but he really takes off this third year at Arkansas. Averages 15.1 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game. Not much of a playmaker. You're not going to be counting on him to be, a high level shooter, a high level scorer, as we saw. Only shot 25.6% this year, but he's a man already. He grew into his body really well over these past few years. Got into the weight room at Kentucky. If you look at his frame and the pictures of him when he is leaving high school, he's got the skinny kind of wiry frame. He's really bulked up, has an NBA ready body from day one, and at 6'8", little over 200 pounds, he's got that NBA frame that can go out there and defend guys. He's very athletic, going to be a very good player in transition. You go and watch some of his highlight tapes. He's catching lobs all over the place. A very athletic player, going to need to continue to develop his offensive game, but he's a guy that I think certainly hasn't hit his ceiling yet, and he fits that perfect description of getting younger and getting more athletic. And he's a guy that I think fits right into a mix with Justin Edwards, Kelly Oubre, Paul George, the slew of guys that we kind of have on the wing, Lonnie Walker as well, whether you want to classify him as a 2 or a 3 at this stage of his career, but he fits right into that description of adding another young and athletic player. And everyone in the comments is always talking about forwards. This is a guy that fits that kind of 3, and I think maybe even long term could play in kind of a small ball 4 role as well, because he rebounds really well for his size, and he's a physical player too. And I think still kind of just scratching the surface. As I said, a late bloomer out of high school, followed his high school career towards the end, because I saw he got offered by Kentucky, he commits to Kentucky, and it's like, who is this guy? No one's heard of him. He's not on the radar. He's not a top 100 guy. He finds his way to Kentucky, doesn't really play the first year, kind of plays in the second year, but really takes off in year 3 under Coach Calipari. Keeps his name in the NBA draft, and is a player, Adou Thiero, that I think the 76ers should certainly keep an eye on. Has his flaws, that's why he's going to most likely be a second-round pick. I could see him sneaking into the back end of the first round, but Adou Thiero is a guy that I certainly have my eyes on. The Sixers are going to have their eyes on, and I've seen him mocked to the Sixers in quite a few drafts as well. And another player that I'm keeping my eyes on, as it says here, a senior, but he was eligible for a 5th year to go back for another season. That's Jamir Watkins, and a Trenton, New Jersey guy. So he played in the area growing up in the Philadelphia area. If you're familiar with AAU ball around here, he's a team final guy, so he's familiar with the area. I always kind of, not biasly, but, give that a little bit of credit towards these guys. Like, you look at a guy like Justin Edwards. He knew what to expect coming to Philadelphia. He knew what to expect playing for the Sixers, playing in this city, and he made the most of it. Jamir Watkins is another guy from the area, had a really good year this past year at Florida State, 18.4 points per game, 5.7 rebounds per game. The thing with him is, as well, the shot and the consistency of the shot will determine how long of a career, how successful of a career he has. But I think you could point to 7 or 8 prospects out of 10 coming into the NBA draft every year, and you can say he's got to get better at shooting. And we have seen guys do that. We do see guys get better at shooting over time. But he's a 6'7" athletic wing, I think a defensive pest, a defensive disruptor, another player you throw perfectly into the mix where it's like, Kelly Oubre, say what you want about him, but he always plays hard. I think his motor is one of his defining traits, one of the best things about his game. You throw Jamir Watkins out there, I think he's got one of the best motors in this draft, especially out of these second-round picks. When you're looking to get more athletic on the wing, Jamir Watkins kind of fits in there. He's like a Lonnie Walker where he plays really hard. He's a high-flying athlete. He's not going to be a guy that you give the ball to and say, go get me 20 points, but he'll go out there, he'll stick his nose in there. He's got the defensive athleticism and ability and the aptitude as well. I think he's a willing player on both sides, and he's a guy that I think just makes your team better. He played at VCU too, so he kind of grew up in that, that defensive-minded intensity culture that VCU teams always have. Transfers over to Florida State. Florida State's had some rough years over the past couple years, but he was one of, if not the best player on this Florida State team over these past few seasons. So both Thiero and Jamir Watkins are 2 guys that keep their name in the draft with a year with some more eligibility to go. They enter early, so it sounds like they'll definitely be at least a second-round pick, maybe a back half of the first-round pick, but they're going to be in the mix in that range for the Sixers. These are 2 guys I'm fully expecting the Sixers to bring in for workouts. And when you go back to the big picture kind of thoughts of this video and what we're talking about, what we're breaking down, Daryl Morey wants to get younger, wants to get more athletic, and you have the opportunity to do that with a very cheap player here at the number 35 overall pick. Throw him into that young and evolving group that involves, it includes Justin Edwards, Kelly Oubre for the next year, Lonnie Walker most likely for another year as well. See what more you can get out of him. And there's going to be a few undrafted guys I think that the Sixers are going to be in the mix for. Obviously, we'll have to see the way that the dust settles with that. But getting younger, getting more athletic is the main focus kind of this offseason when your hands are kind of tied. You're tied up to 3 max contract players in Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid. You have to find kind of cheap other alternative ways. You look at the Thunder, they've done it with mostly first round picks, but even teams like the Pacers, a guy like Nembhard, like that is a second round pick that they've made the most of. Obi Toppin on his kind of second contract. The Sixers have to look for some potential flyer options, maybe some guys that haven't pinned out exactly in their first or second stops, and then they can get the most out of that could fit kind of what Nick Nurse wants in his players and in his system. So really looking forward to seeing what they do with this number 35 pick. We'll be breaking it all down, especially when rumors and reports start coming out of guys going in for workouts to Philly. Philly doesn't really do that many workouts, but I'm going to be trying to hit a lot of these prospects I think could be in the market here at number 35 overall. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know a lot of people want to add bigs, and especially that since we're most likely adding a wing or a guard at that number 3 pick. Are you hyper focused on a big with the second pick at number 35, or are you in this kind of ballpark of let's add a young athletic wing to the rotation? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. As always, please drop a like, please drop a subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time here on Sixers Digest.